The Vietnam War, or as it's known in Vietnam, the American War, was fought between the Communist government of Northern Vietnam and the government of South Vietnam, allied with the US. The North was backed by China and the Viet Cong, which was a guerrilla fighting force from South Vietnam. The war lasted almost 20 years as part of the Cold War, from 1954 to 1975, and ended in the Northern victory. By the end of the war, nearly 3 million people were dead, most of them civilians. With the Viet Cong looking just like and living amongst the Southern civilians, it was difficult for the US and Southern soldiers to tell them apart. Additionally, the VC and the Northern soldiers killed any civilians that had any ties to Americans. January 1968 marked the beginning of the Tet Offensive, a series of Northern attacks and invasions against the Southern and US outposts. These attacks were very effective and eventually led to the withdrawal of the US from the war. While the Vietnam War was a divisive tragedy in the US, it was far more tragic in Vietnam. It left much of the country in ruins with far more civilians than soldiers killed. My grandmother and my father were some of the lucky few that made it out alive. Through all the obstacles and adversities, Phung and Hoang Drouin were able to escape to America and establish a life here for the future generations of their families. My grandmother, Phung Nguyen, was raised by her father, Huy Nguyen, and her grandmother, Khai Nguyen. After they died, she was supported by her adopted father, Lai Son Vu, who was a local priest. She had 2 children in Vietnam with a man named Li Pham. Those 2 children were my father, Hoang Drouin, and my uncle, Pham Nguyen. Phung and Hoang escaped from Vietnam with the help of Bob Drouin, who she later married. Pham stayed in Vietnam for the next 22 years. So, Mao, what was it like growing up in Vietnam?
I think it's okay, I guess. Because when you're younger, you not even know what to throw. Or you deal with it already, you're already there. You have to deal with what you got. Because, when after you're born, you have to stay where you're at. And since you don't have no choice, that's more or less.
What was the atmosphere kind of like? Where did you grow up?
I think at Saigon, when I be from born until 10 years old, I live in a farm, rice farm. And after I moved, and right in the city, right in the Saigon, I don't go nowhere after that.
What was your family like? Who did you grow up with?
My grandmother took care of me the most, and my father too, but my grandmother took care the most.
Where was your mother?
My mother passed away when I was young. She passed away only when I only 2 years old. So that time I was about 21 or 22, my father died. My father died, but my grandmother died before my father. And this is only 8 days between. Yeah, I have an adopted father too. He the priest. I don't live with him, but I live close with him, but he helping me for the school. Yeah. One year I coming home, 1994. First time I come and see him, follow him. I cry like a baby. He don't want to make me crying. He telling me, he say, after I left, I coming nice back. Yeah. And he saying, I think if I having you a little bit more, I don't think you need to go. Oh. Yeah, and he make me cry. I cry, but he telling me that he say, don't worry, I always pray for you, and if next time you come home, you don't see me no more, don't cry because I can wait for you. He tell me that, and I cry. I cry like I never been crying before. Yeah, crying a lot that day. But if I don't have him, I probably die already too. He the one give me a lot of love and take care of me. Whatever I ask him, he always give it to me. He never say no, but he say he feels sorry he don't give me enough. So I can stay there and take care. So, that's what I say. He say, don't worry. I always pray for you and wait for you. Tell me that.
What changed when the war started in Vietnam? And how did you feel about it?
Well, as a war, I know when I younger too. But I never see them. I never see VC, Vietcong. I never see them. Then I living from South from 1954, and the war not going on to 68, 70. When at 68, I getting pregnant, your father. And that's time, there's a war coming right in Saigon, but I have to stay inside. My stomach too big and I cannot drink. So I stay inside the house. That's in 1968.
What was it like trying to raise Dad and Phung during the war?
Kind of hard. That's all right. After your father born, at 2-3 months after, I stopped working. I stopped work with American Solar at Long Beach, and that's it. I work and take care of him. I have to work harder too, so take care of him.
How did you meet Pat?
At the club, at the kitchen at the club, at the Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming Vietnam only for 30 days, and I met him.
He was only there for 30 days?
Only 30 days, and he saw me, and that is. he saw me, and that is. We until now.
Mm-hmm.
50 years now, over 50 years now.
How did you know you could trust Pat?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I can trust him. He crying. No, I don't know how. I have to worry about a life for 2 kids. I cannot do it by myself over there with 2 kids. So that's how come I did go with your grandfather. So he helping me for raise the kids up. So that's why. But you tell me how I trust him. I don't know how. I get it. I only thinking about I need the man helping me raise the kids up. That's the only thing I think of. When I come in here, I only can bring your father. No, I can't say I can't. Because I don't trust American. Well, there you go. I don't trust American because someone, they already coming nice, and they come back Vietnam. The one that worked together with me, and I know her. She'd allowed us stay 30 days and have to be married, but she only stayed for 2 weeks. And she come back, she tell me, she said, don't you dare come in nice day. That's awful. She said it's not like in Vietnam. I said, of course not like in Vietnam, because it's a completely different 2 countries, completely different. At that time, she know I already dated with him. She said, if you all planning coming nice, don't come. But at that time, only reason that time I bring only him, because that girl is scaring me. And my sister scared me too. She's saying, if they saying that if your hand have 2 kids, what you gonna do? So that's why I say I bring your father first. Then if anything not be okay, I'm gonna come back and pick up your uncle. But the time that I'm planning coming home and pick up Phung, that's a 75. I'm planning 75 on summer vacation for students in United States. They go back home, so I can follow them and go back home and pick up the phone. And like this before I go, this lucky I'm not going because if I go that time I stuck. I cannot come back again. If you a lot things have to do, he have to do, we will to bring me back. I got stuck in that war that time, 75, and that's how come your uncle coming here late. But I'm making paperwork for Phung. Take me 20 years before the Phung can come in the United States. I make the dad and I go to Cincinnati making paperwork, pay for somebody make for paperwork. I lost some money. I lost quite a bit of money when I made paperwork for Phung. And we go to him to come here 20 years after. That's hard. It's not easy.
How old were you when Mea met Pa?
When Mel met Pam, I was too young to remember, but I was probably about between 2 and 3 years old.
And how old were you when you came to America?
I came to the U.S. in 1971, and that's with me about three and a half years old.
Was there any difficulty adjusting to life in America?
When you're 3.5 years old, you just kind of go with the flow. And I don't have any memories of adjusting. And as I think back, it's really all I've ever known. Once I got to the US and got into the schools, the memories are a little clearer at that point. And really wasn't an adjustment, it just was what it was. I think the fact of being one of the only Asians in a school system in my classroom for sure, and not very many in the school at all, really wasn't an adjustment. It was just my reality. I had to answer questions all the time about my nationality because I was different from all the other kids. You know, at times that was a little difficult to be different from the rest of the kids. But for the most part, I don't feel like I had a hard time fitting in or adjusting.
What kind of questions were you asked?
Where are you from? Are you Chinese or Japanese? Apparently, those are the only two Asian groups out there when you are in first and second grade. So after a while, I did get annoyed with those same questions. And so I figured out that if I, you got to remember, we're just a few years after the end of this Vietnam War thing that these kids have heard something about, but they really don't understand. And so when I say Vietnam, they oftentimes would look at me with some level of distrust or just questioning whether I was one of the good guys or one of the bad guys. So after a couple of years of answering, where are you from? Are you Chinese, Japanese? And getting tired of that, I just started lying. And I told every kid who ever asked, I go, I'm Hawaiian. That makes me American. And they're like, oh, okay. And moved on. And that was the end of that questioning.
At what point did you stop telling people that you were Hawaiian and start telling people that you were Vietnamese again?
I think when I got through grade school and midway through middle school, I started, it wasn't an issue anymore. I think enough time had passed and the kids, well, of course we didn't move around a whole lot. So I was often at the same school for a long time. And so all the kids that were around me, they knew me for a long time. So they just didn't ask as much. And again, I think towards middle school and definitely into high school, it wasn't an issue. It was easy for me to just say Vietnamese and we moved on.
At what point does you telling people you were related to Bruce Lee fall into this?
Bruce Lee was an awesome way to just get some questionable looks. So I would say, yeah, I'm related to Bruce Lee, right? And they're like, really? I said, yeah, look at us. We look exactly alike. And then we go, wow. And so you know karate, right? Look at me. Do I know karate? So in that case, I really wouldn't have to lie. I would just let them draw their own conclusion. And no one messed with me after that.
How was it growing up knowing that you had an older brother in Vietnam that you didn't know and not knowing when you were going to see him next?
Most of the time, it was really not on the forefront of my mind. You got to understand, when you're between the ages of 3 and 18, a young man's mind is really focused on himself. And I didn't have a whole lot of concern or thoughts of it. But occasionally, when my mom would receive a letter from Vietnam, it would then at that point be something that I thought about. I always wondered about him. I really never knew the story of why he wasn't with me. And, I never asked. Whenever the letters came, it forced me to recognize that, yeah, I've got this brother on the other side of the world that I don't know. More of what my thoughts were probably on my mom, and recognizing how sad she was with the reality of having a child all the way on the other side of the world. But I do feel like I've missed out on having the big brother experience, and to have someone close to me as well. Because Bob and I are only, I think we're 2.5 years apart, where Steve and I are 9 years apart. And so to have someone close in age to have grown up with, I think would have been really cool.
How old were you when Phung came to America, and what was that like?
I was in my mid 20s when he got here. I was excited to finally get to meet him. It was really a little bit of an odd time because he didn't speak English when he first arrived, and I obviously don't speak Vietnamese. So mom would have to translate our conversations, and so there weren't very extensive conversations at all. But I was just so excited to meet this person that was my brother. I think the original idea was for him to come to the U.S. just for a couple of years, get a job, earn some money, and take back to Vietnam a nest egg of maybe $10,000, because $10,000 in Vietnam goes a long way. It wasn't very long before Bob realized that he was going to stay in the U.S. And I remember when he had been in the U.S. about a year, and he'd been taking his English classes to learn how to speak English, and was getting to a point where we could actually have a conversation. And I was home visiting mom and dad and mom, and we were sitting around the dinner table playing cards. And as we're sitting there, and mom's sitting across the table from me, I remember asking him, because I knew the plan. I said, Mom, I said, you were gonna just come to the United States for a little bit and then go home and get married and all that. He goes, yeah. And I said, so are you, you've been here a year. Are you, how do you like it here? Are you still gonna go back to Vietnam? And what I remember so vividly was he had his cards fanned out in front of his face, so all I could see were his eyes. And you could see his eyes smiling, and he just shook his head. He goes, no, his life is too good in the United States.
What happened to your biological father?
He lived into his 70s. A letter came in the mail that was addressed to you, to our home address here in Davidson. And when I opened it up, it was all written in Vietnamese. And so I had my suspicions of where it came from, but so I didn't show my mom right away. Instead, I showed Mom the letter, and it was from our father. And the letter was written by him saying that he was in Washington State visiting one of his sons, and he would love for me to fly out there to meet him. I said, you know what? I just don't feel like I need to go out there. He's passed now. I don't know exactly when he died, but he is not around anymore.
How did you find out that Bob was not your biological dad?
When I went to the DMV with my dad to get my license, the clerk behind the desk was reading off the information and says here that you're his adopted father. Is that right? And as soon as she said that, our eyes met. I saw Bob's eyes, he saw mine, and then he turned to the clerk and he goes, yes, that's right. So they finish up the paperwork and we walk out and he looks at me and he says, so you got any questions? So something like that. And I was like, no, I'm good. And that's how I found out I was adopted.
When you and Mia first came to the US, where all did you live?
My understanding of the timeline and the travel was that when we first arrived in the US, we landed in Boston. The story, as it goes, is that coming from the humid tropic area of Vietnam, we were in tank tops and flip-flops and landed in Boston, I think in February, where immediately we had to get some new clothing. We went from Boston to Maine. We lived in Maine for not very long before Dad, who was still working for the Army, was moved down to Kentucky. When Papa died, we moved back. But I spent a couple of months in Maine before we ended up moving back to Kentucky. I ended up going through high school in Lexington. I ended up at the University of Louisville for a 5-year degree. And then I went straight into Louisville's dental school and got my training there. Then we moved to North Carolina. Right now, I'm just right about the halfway mark, half of my life in Kentucky and half of my life in North Carolina.
What would you say to Mia for her experiences and the sacrifices that she and Bob made for you to live life in America?
I just recently had a moment with Pep not too long ago and just shared with him how much I recognize the difference that he made in my life. I told him how much I am just indebted to him and so grateful that he was a part of my life. He has meant so much to me, and my life would never have been anything like it is without him. And the fact that he was always there for me, he was always loyal to Mom, and he was a good father. And that made me cry, but it was really a tender moment. And I've had many moments with Mom where I've just have shared with her the gratitude. But she doesn't receive it well, to be honest with you. It was very much of a, of course, I had to do it. It was like she sees it as obligation. It's almost like she won't receive thanks for it. It's just what you do. It's just her responsibility, and it's been interesting in trying to, and I probably should just try even harder to let her know how much I'm grateful for her.
If there's one thing that you want future generations of your family to keep in mind about the stuff that you went through and everything that your mom went through, what would that be?
I don't think I went through anything. If I'm going to talk about future generations and legacy, got to be the legacy that Ned has left behind. She's the one that sacrificed and suffered and endured things that we'll never know. What I would love, and one of the things that I'm really grateful for that you're doing this documentary, is to be able to acknowledge her sacrifices and to acknowledge what she has done to set the root for generation to come. And when they trace back their family history, what I really want is that they would look back and they would follow the family tree down, and they would see it was Phung Drouin. And I would want them to know her story, and I would want them to understand again just the sheer magnitude of her sacrifice and her pain as she left a son behind in order to give her kids a chance outside of Vietnam. So that I think as in the years to come, it's her story that needs to be retold.
Are you done?